District here. So let's start with Warren. Warren's here. Warren has a very rich background in international banking and in the bond trading business, and has your own firm. What was the name of it?
Well, there was III and ABM.
Yeah. So man knows what he's talking about the financial interests and how the financial system within America works. And Warren,
Okay, so I was
take it from there.
I'm from Manchester, Connecticut. 1949, I went to Manchester High School, then UConn, class of 71, 1971. And degree in economics. From there I worked at the Savings Bank of Manchester. That was my first job in a bank, collecting personal loans, repossessing cars. Understood the system from the bottom up. Without that, there's nothing. Banking doesn't work unless you can collect loans. And they had me look at their investment portfolio after a couple of years. And you know, back then, in 1972 actually, there were 2.6 million housing starts that year. 2.6 million, okay? And there were only 200 million people. And the financial sector was guys like me working at a savings bank making $140 a week. And you know, 3:30, 4 o'clock, we're out playing golf every day. And all we did was take in savings deposits and make homeowners loans and some car loans. And I made a loan for somebody's false tooth. And the woman didn't pay, and I had to go collect it.
You did.
But we didn't make too many. That was our derivatives back then. So we made car loans. Okay, so 2 years ago, 300 million people, right? Instead of 200, we have 100 million more people in the U.S. Housing got to 2 million housing starts, and it was called an unsustainable bubble, and it collapsed because it was too wild. Okay, so back when I started, 200 million people, 2.6 million houses. 40 years later, whatever it is, 300 million people, only 2 million houses, we can't sustain it. And the financial sector was 30% of the S&P 500. It's almost 30% of the economy. So we've had this massive expansion in the financial sector, and it can't even sustain housing at a fraction of the rate that we could do back then, when all we had was a bunch of dumb S&Ls with guys like me making $140 a week. And now, you know, they're all making what we're doing and what it's costing us. Okay, so something's gone very wrong. The financial sector is a parasite. It feeds on the real sectors. It figures out a way to make money. It doesn't actually add anything. It doesn't build these cameras. It doesn't do this. It doesn't even allocate capital. I don't have time to go into that. And it's really developed a life of its own. But different story. So from Manchester, I went to Hartford. I worked at Beige, a brokerage house. And then I got recruited to work at Bankers Trust in New York. I went to Wall Street, where I worked on the money desk. I became what you might call an insider in the actual monetary operations. I'd sit there and watch how we borrow and lend from the Fed every day, and how the accounts clear, and Treasury securities. Every night we'd come down and say, what if the Bank of England doesn't buy our bonds? What's the country going to do? We're going to go broke because of the deficit. And then a few years later it was, what if the Saudis don't buy our bonds? And then what if the Chinese don't buy our bonds? And then it was back to somebody else. Now we're back to the Chinese again. And it's like, it never mattered. And it doesn't now, but I'll get back to that. I'm circling around a little bit. I went to Chicago in 1978, in December. It was 8 degrees. And that was the high temperature until March. And I was at William Blair & Company, starting a fixed income arbitrage account, buying and selling in the derivatives markets, the new derivatives markets at the time. Futures markets were brand new, options were brand new. We used to trade all these options in our heads. They didn't have calculators, Black-Scholes models or anything like that. And we invented all kinds of new products that are still around today. And then in 1982, I started my own firm to an investment partnership that was in fixed income arbitrage, we called it, buying and selling, so today it would be called a hedge fund. And I ran it for 15 years till the end of 97 when I turned it over to my partners. I kept a 12% interest, and now I don't have to be in the shop. I can just make my contribution from wherever I want. That was part of the deal, and they run it. And for 15 years we had the highest risk-adjusted returns of any fund. Didn't have a single losing month in 15 years, except 1 month was down 1/10 of 1% in the market, but that was it. So it's a very successful fund. and I'd make regular visits to the Federal Reserve. I know the people in monetary operations. I've met with Bernanke, not since he's been chairman, but before when he was a White House advisor. He was vice chairman before that. Met with Donald Cohen, number 2 guy. Guys like, next week I'll be going back. We're meeting with Kevin Morris, he's one of the board directors. And regularly give him things and talk to him and have an insider type of exchange. So what I'm going to tell you next is probably 50 of us or 100 of us that know this pretty well. But it's not in the news, it's not anywhere. And I understand it. They're, look, you have to go out and get the word out just as a matter of conscience. And they're right. You know, so I'm up here running as a matter of conscience to get the word out as to how it works, because when you know how it works, you know we can fix this economy within 90 days. Yeah, we've lost 8 million jobs in the last 2 years because sales fell off. All we got to do is bring sales back up and everybody gets hired back. Now, they won't all be hired back in 90 days, but it'll be well on the way. And within a year or so, you know, we'll be back to where we were, because it's been a simple drop-off in sales. Okay, car sales went from 17 million to 9 million. Why do you think everybody lost their jobs in the car business? Why do you think the companies went broke? Because they had bad cars? No. Everybody was talking about how terrible the cars were last year, how much money they were losing, because, you know, they lost money because car sales fell in half. No company can survive that type of thing. It's because the government let the economy fall in half for a reason I'll get to. 6 months later, all of a sudden, wow, Ford's got the best, highest fleet mileage of any cars, and GM, we're ahead of Toyota. It's like, what do you think, they developed those in 6 months? Those are 5 years in the works. But the guys who developed those, they've all been fired and sent out because car sales fell in half and they lost money. Anyway, so get me started on that. So look, let me talk about my 3 proposals, which I think you'll like. But the point is, anybody can have these 3 proposals. It's whether you can back them up with the real nuts and bolts of how the system works. My first proposal is based on how the American economy works best. And that is, people working for a living have to have enough take-home pay to be able to buy the products they produce, the goods and services they produce. So you go to work, you work in a company that produces goods and services. We all produce goods and services. If you're working, you should be able to make enough to buy that stuff. But we can't. We used to be able to. In 1999 and 2000 we could. Yeah, we used credit cards and all kinds of things, but at least we could buy it. We had full employment. Today, people are making enough money to buy food and gasoline, maybe pay half their insurance, and that's it. And then they get thrown out of their houses. It's not working because the take-home pay is too low to buy the products we produce.